Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy,
where we're expanding the conversation around Catholic sexuality.
We're your hosts, Ellen and Kathleen. All right, we are back with another Charting Toward Intimacy episode. Welcome back.
That's right, we're here.
And
with baby Josephine too. So
baby Josephine is here. So if you hear some baby noises,
just ignore them.
That's Kathleen's little baby. We are talking today about the marital debt a little bit is what we're discussing. The title of this episode is "Do I Owe My Husband Sex?" And yes and no. I mean, we're going to get into that, right? We're going to get into that. That's not the question to ask, I think.
Yeah.
But it's the question we often ask. And there's a lot of, conversations about this aspect of marital debt and, what do husband and wife owe each other? And this brings us into, Ephesians 5 and what that chapter of the letter to the Ephesians says and misinterpretations and all of that is what we're going to dive into today.
We're going to try.
Yeah.
We're going to try.
So we're going to start off, we're going to talk a little bit of background stuff. We're going to give you some nuggets from theology of the body, some nuggets from the Bible, and then we're going to jump into kind of what we see in this conversation and how we need to be thinking about this and how we need to be having this conversation with our spouses. Kathleen, why don't you share a little bit about the exchange of the gift?
Yeah, so I've got this awesome book, which is Theology of the Body in Simple Language.
Awesome. Who's it written by?
It's actually, honestly, it doesn't even really have an author. It's published by Philokalia Books.
Okay.
But I think it's like, I'm sure in here there's like based on a series of talks by Pope John Paul II. It's not even like, written by...
So it might be kind of compiled by a number of authors.
It is. That's exactly what I think. So this is perfect. Honestly, I highly recommend this book for anybody that is like me, who has very little time or a very short attention span and maybe a lot of children running around.
Yeah. Also, if you're not a Christopher West fan, here's a great Theology of the Body intro. If you're like, man, I am so tired of these ladies telling me to get Christopher West books. I just don't like him that much. Like some people just don't like how he writes. That's fine. Here's a great resource.
Just a summary of the sections of Theology of the Body, and it's really each page or each little section is like a page and a half, maybe 2 pages.
That's great.
So it's really easy to take in short snippets. So anyway, Theology of the Body in simple language.
We'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. So there's a section titled "A Gift for Each Other." Okay, and in here it says, "In their nakedness and innocence, Adam and Eve gave of themselves and accepted each other. This exchange of the gift involved the whole of their being, their humanity, their masculinity and femininity, their bodies and souls. At this level, the giving and the receiving are so intertwined that there's almost no distinguishing between them. The two become one. It is difficult to know where the giving stops and the receiving begins."
I love that. And
I love that too.
It's such a good place for us to start this conversation because human, when I use the term man in what I'm about to say, I mean like human, male and female. Man is the only creature that God created for its own sake. And what that means is, so man is made in the image and likeness of God. God revealed the eternal mystery of himself as an eternal exchange of love. That means that there is eternally this giving and receiving of love. One way to think about this, and again, this is not like a perfect analogy, but this is just one way to think about it. If it helps, great. is, God gives the gift, the Father gives the gift.
Yeah.
The Son perfectly receives the gift and then gives it right back. And that gift of love is the Holy Spirit, circling. I'm circling my finger right now. You can't see me. But the Holy Spirit is that cyclical spiration of love that is like
love begets love.
Yes.
It's and it's constantly connected. And that I love that image of, it's hard to tell where the giving starts or the giving stops and the receiving begins, because it's just they're constantly blending into each other. And I don't know, to me, the idea that man and woman, right, like in marriage and in their sexual relationship are meant to mirror that. Oh my goodness. Like how?
Right. That's a big call.
That's a big call.
And the only time that has happened perfectly was between our first parents in the garden before original sin. But we are still called to that. Gaudium et Spes, which is a document, a Vatican document from Vatican II, it talks about how because man is made in the image and likeness of God, and God is this eternal exchanging of gift, man can only find himself through a gift of self. We're finding that image of ourselves, understanding ourselves through giving of ourselves. And then we are called to fully receive our spouse. So something else that we want to talk about before we really get into this conversation, because again, we're building that foundation. We want to give you a couple of nuggets to have in your mind as we're going through this conversation, is we want to talk about Ephesians 5. And I think I have something really profound to say to you all. It's really important. It's gonna blow your mind. Okay. Now, really quick, actually, before I say this profound thing, Ephesians 5 is most likely, probably, the most contested chapter of Scripture.
Any anti-Catholic or non-Christian, they're always going to combat you with Ephesians 5.
Ephesians 5 is the one where you hear, wives submit to your husbands. And people have a problem with that. Okay, so here's this profound thing I'm going to say to you. Ephesians 4 comes before Ephesians 5.
That's not true.
Yeah, it does.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It does.
5 obviously comes before 4.
Yeah, I know. All right, so here's why I'm saying that. So the language that St. Paul uses in Ephesians 5 is confusing. In Ephesians 4, St. Paul tells the Ephesians, hey, the Gentiles talk in a certain way, and you do too. You use this language, but I am going to redefine some terms for you because I want to call you to reclaim these terms and understand them in a new way. St. Paul was a man of the culture. He lived the culture before his conversion. And so he knew how to use the language. And so what he was doing was saying, yeah, you guys talk about, you have this word submission in your culture, and it's the language that's used for a master-slave situation. I'm calling you to a new understanding of that word. It's a lot of what Jesus did when he called everyone to a new ethos of redemption. He said, hey, look, you heard it said that you must not commit adultery, but I tell you, whoever looks with lust has already committed adultery in his heart. When Jesus says that, he's calling people out of the language that they used and the laws that they had interpreted from that language. And he says, it's not about checking the box and filling the law. It is about changing your heart. And so St. Paul he's copying that, he's imitating that exact formula.
Yeah.
of, hey, you use these words, but I'm going to use the language of the culture. I'm going to give it a whole new meaning so that you can live in this world in a new way. So here's the quote from Ephesians 4 that kind of talks about that. Christians must no longer live as the Gentiles do. They're darkened in their understanding due to their hardness of heart. So put off your old nature, which is corrupt through deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and put on the new nature created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. So he's calling the Ephesians out of this old way of thinking and saying, look, you're Christian now. We have a new way of thinking. We have a new ethos. Okay, so here's the line. Here's the line that gets all the rage.
I was going to say,
be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. As the church is subject to Christ, so let wives also be subject in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Okay, so
that last part's important.
We just talked about gift. We talked about giving and receiving love. And what Kathleen was quoting from that wonderful book, Theology of the Body in Simple Language, yeah.
Yeah.
Is, in a true giving relationship, in what we're called to, you can't really even tell where the giving stops and the receiving starts, and right. But if you step away from that, you recognize that there is a need for someone to initiate the gift and someone to receive the gift first. That has to be how it happens.
Yeah.
And so what this line is saying, as the church is subject to Christ, so let wives also be subject to in everything to their husbands. What that line is saying is that somebody has to initiate the gift. Christ initiated the gift, and the church received that gift. Just because there is an order to who gives first and who receives first. Just because there is an order doesn't mean that one is better than the other.
Right.
It just means that somebody has to start the gift. And I want you to think biologically right now. In intercourse, the man physically gives a gift, and the woman physically receives a gift. Right?
I'm, in looking at this book still, there's the beautiful point that woman herself was made as a gift for man. So that it just goes to show how, man in intercourse is physically giving a gift that woman is physically receiving. But before that, woman was given a gift as a gift to man that man then had to receive. And that goes to sort of show that cyclical nature of love begetting love, right? That we are meant to mirror, which feels like such an immense task. She was entrusted to his eyes, his sensitivity, his heart, and to complete the exchange of the gift, he must give himself to her in return.
Right. And this chapter of Ephesians is not a surrender to tyranny.
Right.
It is a call for this spirating gift.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. There is a way that a man becomes a gift, and there is a way that a woman becomes a gift, and they're different. Because our biology is different.
Not to mention that man and woman can both cease to be gift. Right. And that happens when we are turned into objects used for self-gratification. You are no longer a gift. Right. So I think in the way that we approach sex and intercourse is so important. Are we approaching this for self-gratification, or are we approaching this to be gift united to each other? that's a huge, huge thing. And I think that's a really blurry line for a lot of people, that we really need to bring to prayer, and as a couple bring to prayer and ask it. Just like I think of like in Tobit, right? Tobias and Sarah on their wedding night, going to prayer before becoming gift, right? To each other. Like that's something that I think we really need to start doing, especially if we struggle with Ephesians 5, right? And with this idea of like, I don't understand this submission business, right? Bring it to prayer, because I think a lot of the reason we don't understand it is because of where we are in our culture and our society, what submission means, like we're talking about, in our current modern language. And knowing some of the really horrible things that people have done,
Right.
for sex, right? That it's like, it's totally changed the way that we approach this and the way that we think about it. And God has the ability to speak to us through his word and to alter how we think and see things. So I think bringing all of this to prayer, and how can I really be gift to my husband, and how can I be gift to my wife, and not cease being the gift, is a really important thing we need to start approaching.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. If we don't have this understanding of this mutual self-gift, when we read this chapter of Ephesians, like there's an understandable like revolt against what's being said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If we don't have this understanding that God is gift, and our role as humans is to receive that gift, and that the love of husband and wife is an image of the great mystery.
Yeah.
And in an image, it's kind of like it's a twofold image, and it blows my mind sometimes, and it's too much to handle because I'm human. But it's also an image of Christ's love for the church. It's this image of the creator-creature relationship. In the creator-creature relationship, God creates first, right? He gives the gift first. He plants the seed.
Yeah.
And then the creature, and if we just go back to Genesis, like, man, human, receives that gift, and then and in receiving then gives himself back. And that's where he finds his true self, when God then gives another gift of woman, and he finds this other creature that he can have this giving and receiving relationship with.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so without this concept of the gift, like being told, wives, be subject to everything to your husband, and husbands, love your wives, that sounds super lopsided. It's like, whoa, I as the woman have to like submit to whatever he wants, and all he has to do is love me. No. That's not at all what Ephesians 5 is saying. Ephesians 5 is saying, wives, be a gift to your husband and receive his gift. Husbands, be a gift to your wife and receive her gift. And that's what Ephesians 5 is calling us to, and that's what we are called to in our marriages.
Yeah. And I think that when I think about what we're being called to here, it's so amazing, like how far we are from, like how far we can feel we are from what we're being called to.
Right. This is what we're called to. This is the ideal.
Right. It's the ideal. And it just feels like, holy cow, like, do we have such a long way to go? And I think of like in my own relationship, right? Like with my husband, how often it is that I need to, that I feel the need to like, okay, you know what? Like, it's not what you're wanting right now, but you do need to lay down, like literally.
Wow, that was an image.
That was pretty good. Totally accidental. But no, you need to lay your life down for your husband right now, you know? And how many times he does the same thing for me, right? Like, wow, she's exhausted and she just needs to rest, you know? Like it's this constant, and to us, I think it feels like a battle, you know? It just feels like this constant, like, pulling one way or the other, when that's not really what it is. It really is this cyclical, you know, exchange of love that we just see, but it hurts a little bit each time, you know, it hurts. And so we see it as this like contention sometimes, like, but it's not, that's what love is it hurts to love in that way, you know, to the self gift, the laying down your life, that hurts, but it's, and so where we see or feel contention, we're actually seeing this cyclical love.
Right.
And we need to change our perspective around it.
Our culture is so sacrifice adverse that we don't think about like that the sacrifice is good, right? And so when we're talking about this self gift that the creator, that God gave us, right? What we're talking about is Jesus on the cross. We're talking about an extremely painful, extremely humiliating self-gift. And that's what we're called to. And so, yeah, so that sacrificial love is going to hurt. And when, like, I love what you were saying about, like, we feel this contention. And I think when we feel that, we're like, oh, I must be doing it wrong because it shouldn't hurt this bad. Right. But no, actually, like, and if you listen to last week's episode, like, marriage is a battleground. Like, there is a battle happening in your marriage between good and evil. And so, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. Yeah. But that doesn't mean, and I think, and this is where sometimes the conversation too gets muddled with this, you know, do I owe my husband sex, or who needs to sacrifice when, and blah, blah, blah. It gets muddled when we think about sacrifice as something horrible and terrible.
Yeah.
Sacrifice and love. You know what Christ did to those two words? He made them the same thing.
Yeah.
If I say I sacrifice for my husband and I say I love my husband, I'm saying the exact same words. Okay. Our culture wants to tear them apart. It wants to say that sacrifice is this hard thing that you just have to grit your teeth and do, and that love is this beautiful thing that just works. Neither of those statements are true.
No, because what are we called to? We're called to serve, to love as Christ loved. And how did Christ love? Was he came and he served, right? He washed the disciples' feet. Like it's, you know, that is our ultimate call, is to love through service.
Right. And that service is giving yourself as gift to your spouse. Right.
Yeah.
And so so it sounds weird to say, oh, when I have sex with my husband, I'm sacrificing for him. Because our culture has twisted that word to mean something different. But you are. A sacrifice of self is a gift of self. Christ gave himself on the cross. He sacrificed himself. He sacrificed his body. He gave his body for something greater. What is a sacrifice in the Old Testament? A sacrifice is when you gave something good to somebody greater, right? You gave the first fruits of your harvest to God. Right? So if you're giving your body to your spouse, you are sacrificing. You're sacrificing your body by giving it to your spouse. So it's not wrong to say it's a sacrifice to have sex with your husband.
Right. Yeah.
Your husband is sacrificing himself as well when he's having sex with you. And so we need to rewrite this script and understand what sacrifice actually means.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. let's talk about the question that we posed at the beginning. Do I owe my husband sex? And I kind of teased like yes and no.
Yeah.
Here's the thing with this conversation, and I also kind of said like this is the wrong question to ask.
Right. Yeah.
This conversation plays out in a lot of different ways. You hear different speakers and different videos and things like that talk about this. And the problem is that it's often this pendulum swing from who is supposed to sacrifice, right? So you get conversations around, okay, I'm the woman and it's my job to love my husband. So even when I'm tired, I give of myself. There's very good things in that statement. There's nothing wrong with that statement. But then you get the pendulum swing and you have the wives should never be forced to have sex with their husband. And it like a husband just needs to recognize that when the wife is tired, like it's his turn to sacrifice. Again, look at that. It's a wrong use of the word sacrifice. Well, not a wrong use, but probably defining it wrong, thinking about it, because it is a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice to have sex, and it's a sacrifice to not have sex.
Yeah.
Because your whole marriage is sacrifice. All right.
So we ever after? No, it's sacrifice ever after.
Right. We've got this pendulum swing of is the woman the one who should sacrifice, or is the man the one who should sacrifice? Guess what?
Both.
Thank you for answering.
You're welcome.
Both of you should sacrifice. Both of those situations are absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? You listening as a woman, I'm talking to the women who are listening. Yes, it's absolutely right that sometimes when you feel really tired, your marriage needs unity more than you need sleep.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also true that sometimes your marriage doesn't need unity more than you need sleep.
Yeah.
Or just to not be touched or whatever. Husbands, you men listening, it is very true that sometimes your wife is going to have sex with you when she doesn't really want to. And that is a beautiful gift. Mm-hmm. And you should receive that gift with the utmost joy in the entire world.
Yeah.
Because that gift is incredible and it's hard. But then also, husband listening, man listening, there are times when your wife rightly is going to say no because that's not what your marriage needs right now. What she needs is for you to give the gift of yourself in support of a full night's sleep or not touching her because she's had children. Out. Yeah, she's touched out, right?
Yeah.
All of those situations are true and good and happen within a marriage.
And I think what's at the crux of it is just solid communication.
Yes.
And that's what, like, if you are initiating and, your spouse is pulling away like, no, not tonight, not right now. And that you feel like that's constantly happening, you need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, that needs to be a conversation that's had because there's going to be a lack of understanding. And maybe the way to do that is like, on a regular basis, maybe you talk about it daily, whatever, like, where am I right now? What are my needs? This is why even just talking about your day is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about how was your day? How did you feel? How are you feeling right now from it? Like, did your day rejuvenate you? Did your day exhaust you? Like, where are you emotionally? Right. Yeah. That gives so many clues into what they need that night. Right. So,
and we're talking from both sides here. I know we
sides.
We gave the example of like the woman being tired, but this absolutely can be flipped in so many different ways. We just used one example to kind of illustrate this give and take. And well, no, I'm sorry. It's never a give and take. It is a give and receive.
It is a give and receive. Exactly. And I think, it's like you're saying, totally different situation, right? Your husband comes home from work and got a promotion or got some like major big thing, and he's like jazzed about it, and you're jazzed about it for him, right? And so you can see that there's a different situation on hand here than like just a woman being tired, right? And why not celebrate the unity that you guys have, the family that you have, the life that you're building, right? Like, it's so many situations could mean so many different things. But even like I said, just talking about your day is going to give those clues as to how should our day lead into our night? Like, what do we need as a union, right? What do we need as a couple right now? How can I love?
Yeah. Get on the same page.
Get on the same page
often, so that you can be on the same page in the bedroom, right?
And I think it's the most like obvious and like typical like piece of advice that people give married couples, and so it feels kind of like cheap to say that, like, oh, communicate, but like it really is the crux.
It is.
Of it. Like, it's like you just can't do anything without it. It's so essential in like every aspect, but especially in the exchange of the gifting yourself and being gift.
There's a lot more that we could say about this topic, but we like to keep the episode short. We may return to this topic because, again, there's a lot to say about it. It's a tough topic, but that's what we have for you today.
Woohoo.
Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.